Hey guys, it's Rachel here with Cal on Thankful Thursday, and this week we've been looking at a number of issues concerning living in the now. I know on Monday Tara covered looking at the bigger picture in recovery. Tuesday was like just small steps in the moment. And I think Ariel yesterday was looking at what you do have, appreciating what you do have instead of trying to change what you've got. And I think that kind of links me quite well into my video today, which is going to be about letting go of the past so you can live in the now. It's quite there's quite a lot to take on in that, and I've kind of had the statement going around in my head a little bit, and thinking about how it relates to me, or thinking about how I can relate this back to you. I'm actually in the process, I guess, at the moment, of something quite similar with regards to letting go. And although it may differ from those of you who are struggling with your eating disorder at the moment and looking at ways of letting go of destructive behaviours, especially associated with your eating disorder, what I'm going through now is a good, sort of 5 years later on in my recovery, and I've remained in therapy. I don't know how well you know that, the viewers know that, but I have been in therapy for an awful long time. I've been in active therapy since 2001. And I've done the most of the work in the last sort of few years with my current therapist, and in the sort of three years before that, and with another therapist. And I've been thinking a lot about how I cope with my anxiety, how I manage, not control, but when I was very poorly, most of the people who I knew and was in contact with were people who had eating disorders. As I've recovered, I've learned that it's very difficult to, for your own sake, if you want to go on and recover, you need to in some ways let go of people who struggle. And I think the only similarity I can link that with, or way of expressing what I'm trying to articulate here, is when you think about somebody who's perhaps been an alcoholic or a drug addict, and when they go into recovery they have to let go of their friends who they maybe took drugs with, who were drug addicts themselves. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you stop caring about those people or want something better for those people. It means that you are moving on. And what I think can be a trap with eating disorders is that you sort of move in those same circles, and it becomes very difficult to distance yourself and say, hang on, where am I? What's going on with me? And that's something I've had to work incredibly hard at. I'm incredibly maternal, like to protect people, like to sort of put my arms around people, and I guess in some degree I've wanted to save people and help them recover, because I have such a passion myself in terms of my own recovery. And the reason I make the videos here is because I want to communicate something to other sufferers. I want there to be a message here. And what I've had to do for my own sake is look at where I can target my energy, but where I can target my energy and it makes a difference. So making a video once a week here and staying on top of some of the messages we get feels enough for me at the moment. And in no other area of my life am I particularly engaged with or involved with other people with eating disorders. I've been able to let go of a lot of that. And it doesn't mean that I've ever stopped caring about some of those people. Those people will stay in my thoughts, or they will remain in my thoughts for the rest of my life, probably, because I've met some really incredible people. And yet I've learned that for my own recovery I need to step back from some of those who do struggle. So that for me has been my letting go and trying to live in the now. So rather than trying to sort of save the world or everybody with eating disorders, and what happens with me is that if I end up engaged in dialogue with somebody with an eating disorder, I want to feed them all this like information and knowledge, and I want that to make a difference to them. And what I've learned over the past few years is that yes, that can help some people, but that person has to be in the place to receive that. And I guess what I'm kind of getting at here is that for me to live in the now and not remain in the past, I'm having to engage myself with activities, with people, with stimulus, with whatever that is, who don't have eating disorder struggles, or who have maybe had eating disorder struggles and now are in a place of recovery themselves. And it's been difficult, it's been very, very difficult, and yet it has been something I've needed to do to live in the now. I think that living in the now becomes incredibly hard when you've struggled with an eating disorder. People develop eating disorders for endless reasons, countless reasons. Some of those reasons may have been some form of abuse, whether physical, sexual or emotional in their past, maybe bullying, some form of traumatic incident. That can be anything, that doesn't have to be something abusive. Or people can be brought up in an environment which is especially damaging, and that is the reason why they turn to an eating disorder. Maybe their family members have had eating disorders. The reasons go on. And I think what I would ask you now as an individual is to look at your circumstances. Try and not get lost in other people's experiences, and look at your own and really think about what could have led you to the struggles that you have, and to gain insight through everyday experience. Where I am today is a very different place than where I was 6 months ago. Over the last 3 months, I have really engaged myself with therapy and really been moving the past into the present and looking at what goes on in my present that can be connected to my past, not going into my past and going through all of what had happened, but looking at the links there and then saying, right, how can I help myself in the present? And something that is used with numerous patients who have DBT therapy is this idea of mindfulness. And being mindful meaning it's a state of, without sounding all kind of Zen philosophy, it's a state of awareness, and it's a capacity to hold yourself sometimes above yourself, and to be able to look down and say, well, hang on, this is going to help me with this is going to help me with that. And as you go through experiences, everybody has to have their own experiences, everybody has to have their own recovery journey, and to be aware of that, be open to that, keep your eyes open, keep looking around you, learn and live it, learn it basically. And with regards to being mindful, it's keeping you in the present, it's saying, what can I do in the now that's going to help me? In a large majority of cases, people with eating disorders who have been abused will need to at some point go into their past, will need to, I'm not going to use the word drag up the past because I don't think that's particularly helpful. I don't think that to deal with your past you need to be lost in your past or overly focused on your past. I think that what is important is that you can find words for what perhaps happened in your past. And we talked about some of this a couple of weeks ago, about finding a voice, giving a voice to yourself. And the more you can find a voice to yourself, the easier it's going to be to live in your present. Because I think what happens when you do struggle, when we do suffer, when we are perhaps depressed or we're not eating right or whatever, and a huge majority of issues, mental health issues that come up, is that you do sink into the past, that you do perhaps, whether consciously or not, hold yourself in the past. I think with regards to active recovery, that very much involves you being present as well. And as I've said a million times just now, it is about seeing what you can do in the present. And I had a therapy session yesterday, and I kind of went in there, and you know, I was the last session we'd been talking about my attachments, especially to my mother as a child and her depression. And I went in sort of yesterday, and I said, I want to be well, and I am quite well at the moment. I've had a lot of therapy just recently. I've really pushed myself with that therapy, and I could look at stages where I've been particularly well for a number of months, physically well, emotionally well, spiritually well, strong, I guess,